Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Babu listithna'i fil yamin. Making an exception in an oath. We remind ourselves, oaths, by Allah, this happened. By Allah, I will do this. Vow, oh Allah, you have already recommended that I do this. I am now making it obligatory for me. Okay? Two different things. Okay? So it says أخبرنا مالك حدثنا نافع أن عبد الله بن عمر قال من قال والله ثم قال إن شاء الله ثم لم يفعل الذي عليه لم يحنث. Right? So Imam Malik said, Nafi' said that Abdullah ibn Umar said, whoever says by Allah I will do such and such, and then says if Allah wills, and then does not do that by which he swore to do, has not fulfilled his oath. Has not failed to fulfill his oath. Because you said inshallah. Right? You're not saying that you will do it. قال وحمد هذا نأخذ وإن قال إن شاء الله ووصلها بيمينه فلا شيء عليه وهو قول أبي حنيفة. Right? He says inshallah, and it is, Imam Muhammad says, we adhere to this if he says inshallah and he joins it immediate to his oath, not something that comes later on. Right? It's not something that comes later on, right? Then there's nothing against him. There's no harm, right? This is the verdict of Imam Abu Hanifa. Notice he doesn't say and our fuqaha in general. So when he says and our fuqaha in general, he's saying the Kufan scholars in general. Here he's saying this is not something that's necessarily agreed upon or well debated, right? So when we say the Hanafi school is the Kufan school, the Hanafi school, the Kufan school is not that mature to have answers on every single thing or to have agreed on every single thing. It's not like that. Bab الرجل يموت وعليه نذر. Right? A man dies with a vow. Right? أخبرنا مالك حدثنا أبو شهاب عن عبيد الله بن عبد الله بن عتبة بن مسعود عن عبد الله بن عباس أن سعد بن عبادة استفتى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال إن أمي ماتت وعليها نذر لم تقضه قال اقضيه عنها. Right? So Malik informed us from Ibn Shihab, who narrated to us from Abdullah ibn Ubaidullah ibn Utbah ibn Mas'ud, from Abdullah ibn Abbas, that Sa'd ibn Ubadah sought a fatwa from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu saying, "My mother died while having a vow that she did not fulfill, and she said, fulfill it for her." قال محمد ما كان من نذر أو صدقة أو حج قضى عنها أجزاء ذلك إن شاء الله وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا رحمه الله. Right, so he says so he says whatever vow, charity or hajj he discharges on her behalf will suffice her inshallah. That is the verdict of Abu Hanifa and our fuqaha in general. Okay, but the general thing is this is an exception to a rule. By default, you cannot do acts of worship for other people. Right? So we have a weak position, for example, in the Shafi school, so can I do someone else's fasts for them? Yes, if they tell me, or yes, if I'm related to them, but I can't just do it like that. If I'm not related to them and they didn't tell me, I can't do that. I can't do someone else's prayer, a fast for them. Can you do someone else's prayers for them once they die? The default is no, right? Taqiyuddin Subki, he had that position and he did that for some relatives that hadn't prayed, right? But the default is you cannot pray. You cannot pray on behalf of somebody else or do any act of worship on behalf of somebody else. You can do an act of worship and say, "Oh Allah, please give them the reward." That's something totally different. But to actually do an act of worship on their behalf is totally different. So this is khilaf al-qiyas. It's not the non-default. Babu man halafa aw nadhara fi ma'siyatin. Right, you make a vow to do a sin. So the Shafi is going to say a vow to do a sin, it does not count. Right? An oath to do a sin counts, but you have to break it and you have to expiate. Okay? So it says, أخبرنا مالك حدثنا طلحة بن عبد الله عن قاسم ibn Muhammad. Who is Qasim Muhammad? Azhar. Muhammad Sabir, you also might know. Who is Qasim ibn Muhammad? What is his relationship to Aisha?
Uh, Not sure. Sure.
Okay, no worries. Muhammad, any Muhammad Sabir?
Uh, Qasim bin Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr,
100, good. So that means Muhammad is the brother of Aisha?
half brother because
Good.
from
Excellent.
different mother.
Good. So what happened then? So he Muhammad's mother is
So
who?
okay. Uh, I'm trying to remember her name. But I know that she was married
Asma bint
to Sayyidina
Umays.
Ja'far.
Asma bint Umays. Okay. So she was the wife of whom?
Sayyidina Ja'far,
Sayyidina Ja'far. Sayyidina Ja'far died as Shaheed.
Shaheed, and then
Then she married
she married Sayyidina Abu Bakr.
Sayyidina Abu Bakr, which is haram, right? You can't once your husband dies, you can't get married, right?
No, no, no. I mean, after that, it's fine, right?
It's fine, right? It's not just fine, it should happen. Like it's not just
Yeah.
fine, it should happen. Obviously, she doesn't want to get married, she shouldn't get married. But the problem is in our many cultures, right? As her, correct me if I'm wrong, Muhammad, what's it like in Kenya? I don't know. But like a woman who's divorced or a woman who's a widow does not get married. That's weird. That's culturally unacceptable, right?
For us, like they
Yeah,
get married, so
Alhamdulillah.
it's common to get married.
In Kenya, right, that's why it's that's a good thing, right? And divorce, as from my understanding, Kenya is not just a big deal. Whereas in
yeah.
many go
It
ahead,
was a
Asma.
taboo, like you said, Shay. Yeah, it was a taboo maybe like 30 years back in India, but things are changing now.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
It's a huge thing, right? So here we see that Asma bint Umays, she's a noble woman, a good woman. Her husband dies as shaheed. Why shouldn't she get married? She marries the best of the best. She marries
Sayyidina Abu Bakr.
Sayyidina Abu Bakr. Sayyidina Abu Bakr is also martyred. And now she
Now
marries,
she married Sayyidina Ali.
which is haram, right? It's not, right? So you married your ex-husband's little brother. It's not haram, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? So you don't have to marry your ex-husband's brother. Well, there's nothing wrong with marrying that, right? So then what happens? So with Sayyidina Abu Bakr, um she has Muhammad, and then Muhammad is raised by whom?
Is it Sayyidatuna Aisha?
Sayyidina
No,
initially Sayyidina Ali. So
Sayyidina Ali, yes.
Sayyidina Ali. So this is very important because Sayyidina Abu Bakr's son is raised by Sayyidina Ali. So the Shia idea of Ahl Bayt, enmity, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, these are bad people, right? And Sayyidina Ali, Sayyidina Ja'far, these people are good people, and there's this enmity between these. There were political things here and there. That's true, but the picture that they give is not right. Right? These people are all Ahl Bayt. These are people who are all Ahl Bayt, right? And so Sayyidina Ali basically raises Sayyidina Abu Bakr's son, Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr. Sayyidina Ali sends Muhammad as a representative to Egypt. He is killed. His son, Al Qasim, and his sister are sent back to Medina to be safe and to be raised by Sayyidat Aisha. Do you see this connection? Right? You see this connection. So so now she grows up in the house of Aisha. So I have another question for you. So we learned women should get remarried, right? Very important that I know that if I get divorced, I can get remarried. It's not a problem. There's nothing wrong with that. Whether I'm young or old, it doesn't matter. People should get married. It's a good thing. Should be married. I'm 60, get married. Just have somebody in your life. Why not? Right? There's no stigma in that. You got divorced, your husband died, there's no stigma, it's no problem, right? It's important. People should be married, right? People should be married, right? Um, okay, that's number one. Number two, the tie between Ahl Bayt. Okay. Number three, I have a question. What is more important? Which has more weight? What is more indicative of the Sharia of Allah? Okay. A fatwa of Qasim ibn Muhammad or a hadith in Sahih Bukhari?
The fatwa.
Say it again, Ashar.
And the fatwa would be more important.
Right. So let's label Azhar as a kafir because he's saying that the words of a tabi'i are more important than the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Is that fair?
No.
No. So Azhar meets Qasim ibn Muhammad. He's like, what's your fatwa? So you are a student of Faqiha Aisha. You're not even going to quote a hadith to me. You're just going to give me a fatwa. Qasim ibn Muhammad said X. Khalas. Thank you very much. This is one of the great muftis of Medina. And that's it. So along comes certain people like Imam Shafi'i and says, no, a hadith in Sahih Bukhari, meaning a Sahih hadith, is more important than the fatwa of Qasim Muhammad. He has a point. He has a point, right? At the end of the day, Qasim Muhammad is not a prophet, right? And the Sahih hadith from the Prophet is more important. But are there questions around a hadith? Is it actually sahih? Did the Prophet ﷺ actually say it? Did I understand it properly? Is there this? Is there that? Was it abrogated? Versus Al-Qasim Muhammad, abrogation, all of those issues are solved because here I am. I'm studying with my aunt, I guess, Aisha. She tells me things, everything's there, information is shared. It's very refined, right? So it's very easy for someone like Azhar and somebody else to say, no, I prefer the fatwa of Qasim Muhammad over a hadith in Bukhari. Okay? And then I come along and I bring six other Qasim Muhammads, right? Like Kharija ibn Zayd ibn Thabit, like Sa'id ibn Musayyab, like these different people. And I have the Fuqaha as-Sab'a, right? The seven Fuqaha of Medina. And khalas, that's the deen of Allah, right? So that's the Maliki school, guys. That's the Maliki school, is that Al-Qasim Muhammad and people like him, their fiqh, how they understand things, is more important than looking at the primary texts because they are the receivers of the primary texts. So what they did is the deen of Allah. If they pray with their hands by their sides, that's it. Khalas. Thank you very much. If they give zakat in a certain way and don't give zakat another, khalas, that's it. I'm not that particularly interested in this hadith or that hadith. This hadith or that hadith is useful when there's no fatwa from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Right? So Shafis would say no. The Shafis, we say Sahih hadith is more important. You're quoting the Prophet ﷺ, and maybe Qasim Muhammad doesn't know all the hadith. Maybe Qasim Muhammad might make an analogy that's not right, and you cannot just do taqleed. A mujtahid cannot do taqleed of a mujtahid, right? So along comes someone like Imam Ahmad, right? Or Imam Shafi'i. This is Habibi. And with all due respect, Qasim Muhammad doesn't know everything, does he? So yeah, his fatwa is going to be useful, but there are other fatwa. Right. So why would I blindly follow Qasim Muhammad? Rather, I'm going to look at the Quran and Sunnah and I'm going to do ijtihad. Right. That's also an argument. But the point is both have strong weight. That's the difference. When you come along and you see, I disagree with you, but I can see where you're coming from, right? And that's a good point, as opposed to I disagree with you and you're a kafir. I disagree with you and you don't even know what you're doing. You're just insane, right? You only pray with your hands by your side because you're a fool and because your parents were Maliki. You only pray, you don't do Rafa Yadain because you're a fool because your dad's Indian, right? That's how people look at things, right? Like you're just Hanafi because you're a fool. Whereas that's not how it is. So we find this in the Hanafi and the Maliki school, strong emphasis on the fiqh of certain key fuqaha that they really revere, the fuqaha of Medina, the fuqaha of Kufa, right? Really important people because they were important people, right? And they were in a stage where all the information was being gathered, they processed it, and they saw it. They saw the Sahaba, right? And so, it's a very different kind of picture. And so they might not say, quote a hadith, but that doesn't mean they don't have information, right? So it's important to understand we're dealing with two gray areas, and you're weighing up which gray area is more convincing. You're not dealing with right and wrong. Does that make sense?
Yes, Ustad.
Right. Okay. So he says,
Is
go ahead.
Sheikh, is it similar to the way like Umar bin Khattab, radiallahu anhu, whenever he kind of gives a ruling on Mimbar and then he gets corrected by somebody, whether the one of the Sahabas
That's
corrects
slightly
him?
different, Muhammad. Why is it slightly different?
Uh,
Because during the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar, the mujtahid imams were all in one place. Okay, so now you come along and say Sayyidina Abu Bakr said this, Sayyidina Umar said this. None of the mujtahid imams disagreed. Khalas. We're going to go with that. What happens after that is the Muslims spread. So now you're going to have Medinan scholars, Meccan scholars, Kufan scholars, Damascus scholars, and their students, and you have less communication. It's going to take about 100 years for the hadiths to spread everywhere, and for everybody to share all the information that they have. So it's a different picture. Now, when you say, for example, everybody in Medina says that, that doesn't mean everybody in Mecca says that, right? And so it's a slightly different picture. So one is in a context which easily creates a consensus, whereas here, somebody else, like for example, Imam Muhammad wrote a book, right, specifically against following Medina.
So like then the Medina time, like are we supposed to divide like the way you're saying, like there's the time of Abu Bakr and Umar, like early days when everybody like majority are
Yeah.
together, like
But
that's
so
the way we look
thereafter,
at that is different.
yeah, that's one thing. So now you
Yeah.
could arguably, so it's not the fatwa of Sayyidina Umar in terms of Sayyidina Umar, but rather it's the fact that it's ijma'. How do I know there's ijma'? All the mujtahid imams were in one place then. They were few and in one place, right? As opposed to later on, but claiming ijma' is very difficult later on, right? And all you can do is like say this is stronger, like I trust this mufti over that mufti or whatever it is. Like you can't, it's harder to do that. Right? But the point I'm trying to make is the difference between a madhab that's based primarily on fatawa of Sahaba and Tabi'een versus a madhab that's based primarily on hadith. Right? When I say primarily, it doesn't mean that none of them are to the exclusion of the other. It's not really totally excluded. But generally speaking, the Maliki and Hanafi school is based on the fiqh of Sahaba and Tabi'een. It's not based on hadith. And that's fine, that's valid. That's a good way to reach the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ through the understanding and the systems and the rules given by the students of the Sahaba who were powerhouses like Ibrahim Nakha'i, like these people. Makes a lot of sense. The problem is people think that hadith and sunnah, they're not the same thing. Hadith is one good record of the sunnah. Fiqh of the Sahaba and Tabi'een is also another good record of the Sunnah. Not ideal. Neither are ideal, but they're both good records of the Sunnah. Does that make sense? But when people don't understand that, like, yeah, but why would you say that when the Sunnah is this? Meaning, they mean the Hadith says this, but that Hadith might be wrong. The Hadith might be qualified. The Hadith might not mean what you meant, etc. All sorts of things. And I just remind you, right? I'll just remind you now. If we go back to the very beginning of the book, there was a question put to Ibrahim an-Nakhai about raising the hands in prayer. Where is this? Look at this, right? Look at this as an example. Okay. So he said, Imam Muhammad said, Yaqub ibn Ibrahim informed us of Hussein ibn Abdurrahman, who said, I went with Amr ibn Murrah to visit Ibrahim al-Nakhai. Who is Ibrahim al-Nakhai? The student of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, one of the most important muftis of the time of the Tabi'een. Sa'id ibn Jubair, he was asked a question and he said, why are you asking me when you should ask him? Right? Arguably, like he's like the equivalent, he's like the Iraqi equivalent of Sa'id ibn Musayyib. So like the biggest mufti at the time of the Tabi'in. And Amr said, Alqama ibn Wa'il al-Hadrami, hadith from Iraq, reported to me from his father that he prayed with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu and saw him raise his hands when he said Allahu Akbar, and when he bowed, and when he raised them again, right? Shafi style, right? Which is you do the takbir, going into ruku' and coming out. So, i.e., there is a Sahih hadith that the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands going into ruku' and coming out of ruku'. What do you say? Ibrahim Nakhai says, I do not know. Perhaps he only saw the Prophet ﷺ on that day and retained this from him. But Ibn Mas'ud and his companions did not retain it. I never heard it from any one of them. They would only raise their hands at the beginning of the prayer when they would say Allahu Akbar. So the Shafi approach will be the following. It's sahih that the Prophet ﷺ did it. Uh, maybe Abdullah Mas'ud didn't notice it. Maybe his students didn't notice it, right? As long as it's sahih that the Prophet ﷺ did it, and there's no evidence the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, I'm going to follow it. That's the Shafi methodology, right? Imam Shafi said you cannot take a hadith and then take something that this one Sahabi did or another Sahabi did and use that against it. Because there are other Sahaba who did raise their hands. Right? So some did, some didn't. Right? There's a hadith, the Sahih that he did, khalas. It is Sunnah. Khalas, that's the Shafi school. What is the Hanafi approach? The Hanafi approach is, do you know who these people are? Like, do you know who Ibrahim an-Nakha'i is? Do you know who his teachers, Masruq, Alqama, and these people? Right? The students of Abdullah Mas'ud. Do you know who Abdullah Mas'ud is? These people are too great to not know something like this. So they would say, I prefer to follow the ijtihad of Abdullah Mas'ud and his students than to follow this hadith. Right? And perhaps, again, the Prophet did it on one day or twice or three. He did it occasionally, that's all. It's not a thing that he did regularly, such that Abdullah Mas'ud and other people picked it up from him. Does that make sense? So this is not a foolproof system, right? Abdullah Mas'ud is not a prophet, but that's a system that makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to follow these great scholars. However they interpreted it, that's fine. They're like these giants of that very early period, right? Ibrahim al-Nakhai, he didn't study with Abdullah Mas'ud, but he did visit Aisha and he saw Sahaba, etc. And he studied with the great students of Abdullah Mas'ud, right? And so, never heard them do it, and they would only raise their hands at the beginning of the prayer, and that's it, right? Whereas the Shafi approach is, Abdullah Mas'ud is not the world. There are other Sahaba. Sahaba disagreed. Do you raise your hands after in the other times in the prayer or not? Tabi'een disagreed. There's a Sahih Hadith. I'm going to go with it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. Same thing with Imam Malik. Imam Malik can say, yeah, I don't like the Kufans that much. I trust Medinans. If they give a fatwa, I rely on them. That's it. That's more important to me than a hadith. Right? And so in other than this book, in the Muwatta, the narration of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, right? Imam Malik will quote the hadith and he will say, Laysa alayhi al-amal andana. Like, we don't apply this hadith. And that's more important. What my teachers, people like Qasim Muhammad and Imam Malik didn't study with Qasim Muhammad. Imam Malik studied with Abdurrahman ibn Qasim Muhammad, right? So he said, what my teachers like Abdurrahman ibn Qasim Muhammad say is more important than this hadith or that hadith. Right? Because the hadith is a way that the Quran and that the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ has reached us. And this is another way, and this way is better. So it's the issue of which is stronger, which is more indicative, not which is right and which is wrong. Does that make sense?
Yes. So
Go ahead, Muhammad.
can we say like they had some form of taqlid, like in those the way
Exactly.
they
So
follow fatwa?
but so that it's a level of taqlid, right? And even
Mm.
Imam Shafi is heavily influenced by the Maliki school. So is it pure ijtihad? Like Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar? Like there's no precedent whatsoever. And you're just looking at the Quran and what you see the Prophet ﷺ doing and making ijtihad. So what you find is, with the exception of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar, uh, pure ijtihad is not really there. It's basically, let's say, for the time of the Sahaba, it's like 99% ijtihad, and then Tabi'een 98%, and then down, right? By the time of Imam Shafi'i, it's like editing slash ijtihad. Like how creative are you? Somewhat creative, somewhat editing. And you go down. So there's always some level of ijtihad and always some level of taqlid, right? You can call it taqlid or you can call it influence, right? So taqlid is deferring judgment to somebody else. You decide for me. Influence is, what do you think about this? You're intelligent. Oh, I like that. And then you kind of agree or disagree, you're right. So influence is somewhere in between, right? So does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. So ijtihad never stopped and it hasn't stopped, right? But what happens as you go through time is the weight of precedents becomes heavier and heavier and heavier, so that it becomes harder and harder to go against it, right? But sometimes it's different forms of precedents, right? Khair. Make sense, inshallah?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Right. Okay. قال محمد فما كان So it says what a vow, etc. We did that. Okay, so now on to the next topic. We were here, right? من حلف أو نذر في معصية, right? So it says and Qasim Muhammad and Aisha زوج Nabi. So what does زوج mean? That masculine
Spouse,
spouse, isn't that masculine or feminine?
non-gender. It's. I
It's
mean,
what?
it's technically it's masculine.
Masculine, right? So today I'm filling out a form, right? Your wife, you say زوجة, تا مربوطة, زوج and زوجة, right? زوج in reality means a pair. So when you say هذا زوجي or هذه زوجي, you mean she is the one, she's the one who makes me a pair, if that makes sense. The one I'm paired with, right? So زوج in the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam means the one that the Prophet was paired with, right? And some scholars they say you don't say zoja, that's not a word. And some scholars say no, you do say zoja. Right? So and zoj in the but generally speaking, we see this in hadith, zoj, azwaj in the b, right? In the tashahhud, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa azwajihi, right? Wa ala alihi wa azwajihi, not zawjatihi. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من نذر أن يطيع الله فليطعه ومن نذر أن يعصيه فلا يعصيه. Malik informed us, Talha, Abdullah bin Malik informed us that Qasim Muhammad said from the wife of Aisha, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, said, whoever vows to obey Allah, then let him do so. And whoever vows to disobey, let him not do so. And so the Shafis were going to say, i.e., it's not even valid. There's no expiation or anything, right? Because it doesn't count. So you say lillahi alayya an asriq, right? It isn't. I make it obligatory on me for the sake of Allah to go and steal. That doesn't mean anything in the Shafi school, right? Here Imam Muhammad says, قال بهذا نأخذ من نذر نذرا في معصية ولم يسمه فليطع الله وليكفر عن يمينه وهو قول أبي حنيفة. So Imam Muhammad said we adhere to this. Whoever makes a vow to do an act of disobedience, right? Then let him obey Allah, i.e., by not disobeying, by not doing the haram, and expiate for his oath, right? So he's saying, well, you've made an oath here. You've made the equivalent of an oath, right? The Shafis would say you've done nothing. That doesn't mean anything. It's not a valid oath, not a valid vow. Here it's saying no, you have to do the kafara because you've made a promise to Allah, you've broken it. We say you didn't make a promise to Allah, did you? Because that's not a promise that you can make, right? Excuse me. Okay, أخبرنا مالك أخبر يحيى بن سعيد الأنصاري قال سمعت القاسم محمد يقول أتت امرأة إلى ابن عباس فقالت إني نذرت أن أنحر ابني فقال لا تنحري ابنك وكفري عن يمينك فقال شيخ عند ابن عباس جالس كيف يكون في هذا كفارة قال ابن عباس أرأيت أن الله قال والذين يظاهرون من نسائهم ثم جعل فيه من الكفارة ما قد رأيت. Malik informed us from Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, who heard Qasim Muhammad saying. So Qasim Muhammad, notice he didn't just study with Aisha, right? He's now saying a woman came to Ibn Abbas and said, I have vowed to slaughter my son, right? Muhammad Sabir, you have kids, right? And Adib as well, you have kids, right? What percent of the time do our kids deserve to be slaughtered?
Often.
Often, right? So we can relate. This is a fatwa that, touches the heart now. Astaghfirullah, right? So do not slaughter your son, right? So he made a vow, right? So there's a difference. So he says, the person says, Wallahi la adbahanna. By Allah, I will do this. You've made a vow now. You've made an oath. That's different. So now you don't do it, you have to expiate. But now you said, Lillahi alayya, I am now making something that is sunnah and now raising it to the level of recommendation. Okay? I'm raising it to the level of raising recommendation and now making it obligatory. Okay? So he said, do not slaughter him, but rather expiate for your oath. But it said nadhar. She didn't make an oath, right? She made a vow. He said, do not slaughter your son and make expiation for your oath. A sheikh, an old man who was sitting with Ibn Abbas, asked, how can there be an expiation for this? Like, why are you paying an expiation? Ibn Abbas answered, do you not see that Allah, exalted is He, says, وَالَّذِينَ يُظَاهِرُونَ مِن نِسَائِهِمْ, right? Those who promise, they say, you are as haram to me. They say to their wives, you are as haram to me as my mother. Meaning I will never sleep with you. Right? It's called dhihar. I will never sleep with you ever again. Okay? You are as haram to me as my mother. So it says those who divorce their wives. It doesn't say divorce their wives. It says those who الذين يظاهرون من نسائهم. Right? It doesn't say divorce their wives. Anyway. So then what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? It says basically you made this, you and you made this basically promise that you never sleep with her. That's not an act of worship. So, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says either you follow it up with a divorce, you say, fine, you're haram to me, okay, fine. Then divorce me then if it's that bad. Go all the way, or if you take her back, then you have to do a kafara. Right? So the point Ibn Abbas is saying is a woman saying, I will kill my son, actually I take that back, is analogous to a man saying to his wife, you are as haram to me as my mother, and then actually I take that back, I will sleep with you now. Okay? So that's his analogy. Right? قال محمد وبقول ابن عباس نأخذ وهذا مما وصفت لك أنه من حلف أو نذر نذرا في معصية فلا يعصين وليكفر عن يمينه. So again, the Shafis are going to say, no, there's a difference between a vow and an oath. Wallahi, I will slaughter my son. You have taken Allah's name to aver, to confirm something. This is now not going to happen. Okay, so now you have to expiate. As opposed to Lillahi alayya and Lillahi alayya and a'sillah, for example. It is now made obligatory upon me for me to disobey Allah. Then there's nothing. It's not. You haven't. Right. That's not a valid vow to begin with. Um. So again, let's go back to the issue about following Qasim Muhammad. Like you say, do you honestly think that you know more than Al Qasim ibn Muhammad? Say no. Okay, do you think you know more than Sayyidina Umar, Ibn Abbas, so and so? But you will find fatwa from Ibn Abbas, from Sayyidina Umar, from Ibn Umar, from people that don't make any sense. So it's very easy to say, oh, let's just follow Qasim Muhammad 100%, but it's not always right. So one thing that people do is they oversimplify and they give it like a really simple thing. Oh, this is so obvious. Sahih Hadith is so obvious. It's not. Labeling a hadith as Sahih or Da'if is not an easy process, and it's not not a 100% objective process. Interpreting the hadith and putting the hadith together is not a 100% system. So they try and make things seem really simple and obvious, but it's actually not. Similarly, oh, I just followed Sahaba. What, you follow all of the Sahaba? What if there's difference of agreement from one Sahabi? What if this, it's actually complex, right? Fiqh is complex. That's why we disagree, right? And so whenever someone tries to like make it seem so obvious, right? That's why if you study any madhab, every single madhab has scholars, has people who are thinking, has people who defended it, because it's complex. And there's a lot of evidence for A, a lot of evidence for B. That's just how it is. Right? So it's so here, come along and say, well, hang on a minute, that's not a vow. So I don't agree with Ibn Abbas. Yeah, that will happen. So could you stand before Allah and say, well, you heard a Sahih Hadith from the Prophet and then didn't follow it because you want to follow Ibn Abbas, even though you wouldn't always follow Ibn Abbas and you wouldn't always follow Sayyidina Umar, right? It's easy to oversimplify it and make it one way or the other. In reality, fiqh, life, wisdom is weighing up tricky pros and cons, right? Weighing up tricky pros and cons. Muhammad said, the verdict of Ibn Abbas is the one we adhere to. This is what I've described to you. So whoever swears an oath or vows to perform an act of disobedience, then he must not do the act of disobedience, of course, and must make an expiation for his oath, right? But we say, what if it's not an oath? What if it's a vow? They say it's the same, we say it's not. أخبرنا مالك أخبر ابن سهيل بن أبي صالح عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة. So just going back, this one like yesterday, just yesterday it was, this hadith, right? I have a copy, a photocopy of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani's own manuscript of Sunan Abi Dawud, right? So it's his own copy of Sunan Abi Dawud that he wrote out and he narrated from his shuyukh back to Abu Dawud. This same hadith was found in Abu Dawud. So I want you to tell me, how did this hadith reach Abu Dawud? So we're hearing this hadith through Imam Muhammad. Imam Muhammad passed away in what? 190 or something like that? I think 190.
There are more than one. There's more than one chain.
Good. So Imam Muhammad studies with Imam Malik. 1 million people will study Imam Malik. So Imam Malik, he passes away in 179. Abu Dawood, I think in 279 or something like that. Like almost like 100 years later. Maybe somebody can double check. I think like 279 or something. So how would the hadith that's here in the Muwatta, how would it reach Abu Dawood?
Two or three narrators down the chain, probably.
Yeah, right. So what's Abu Dawood going to be doing? Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Bukhari, they will be studying with the students of Imam Malik. Okay, all their students, right? So if you can think, I'm in Egypt right now. Here is Rabi' ibn Sulaiman al-Muradi, the scribe of Imam Shafi'i. He's teaching me in the year 260. And he says, Imam Shafi'i told me, who died in 204, that Imam Malik told him. Okay? So I'm in the second half of the 3rd century. I'm going to be studying with the students of Imam Malik or the students of the students of Imam Malik. Does that make sense? So what someone like Abu Dawood would do then is travel the Muslim world, and I'm trying to find people, different versions of these hadith that come from Imam Malik, different versions of hadith that come from Sufyan ibn Uyayna and other people, etc., and gather them all together. And then he's going to do a brief work. The Sunnah Abu Dawood is a brief work, and he'll mention this hadith. So what will happen if you pick up Sunnah Abu Dawood, right? Maybe somebody can Google it, right? Is this same hadith? It will be exactly the same, okay? Um, Not this one here. This is the one I was reading. This same hadith, okay? But you'll just have two more people in the chain. So Abu Dawud will say, so and so told me that so and so told me, right? So this hadith, it might be in Bukhari as well. It will be like the same hadith, but it will just say Bukhari will say Al-Qa'nabi told me. Okay? So let's have a go at doing that right now, guys, if you could. Right? You try typing in the Arabic or something like that, if you can, or type in the English, right? And because the issue with the Arabic is the whole chain will come up, as opposed to the English, you might not have the chain, right? But you're almost certainly going to find this hadith in Bukhari and in Abu Dawud. I saw it in Abu Dawud the other day, and you just see what it looks like. It's the same hadith, but Abu Dawud being a generation or two or three later, he's going to be narrating with one or two people between him and Imam Malik. And if he's lucky, he'll have another chain going around Malik and going back to Zuhri as well. So there might be that I've traveled around the Muslim world, and all my chains go through. I have two chains going back to Malik, three, one actually going around Malik, meaning it goes to somebody else who narrated from this person, right? That's what they're going to be doing. Like, is anybody able to do that? Perhaps Adib, could you have a go trying to find this hadith in Abu Dawud? Muhammad Hashir, can you have a go? And Ashar?
I can check it now. Yeah, Sheikh, it's there. I'll
You
post it.
you put where did you post it? What did you post it in the chat here? Oh, okay, great. So
I just posted.
great. So it says So this is Abu Dawud, is it? Ashar?
Yeah, Sheikh, Abu
Right.
Dhabi.
So notice if you look at the Arabic, it says حدثنا القعنبي قال قرأت على مالك. Okay, so this is Abdullah ibn Qa'naba al-Qa'nabi. Right. This Qa'nabi is also Bukhari's sheikh. Okay, so and that is one of the most famous muwattas of Imam Malik. Okay, so this is one famous narration, right? But the other one is actually the strongest one. So what does that mean? I am Bukhari. I'm a student. I am Abu Dawood. I'm a student. I want the hadith of Malik. What do? I go and find one of the greatest students of Imam Malik, Al-Qa'nabi. I narrate the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Okay? Now I'm the Sheikh. I am Sheikh Abu Dawood. I've studied the world. Now I'm going to I could narrate the Muwatta, right? So then your chain would say, Abu Dawood told me that Qa'nabi said, and then the Muwatta, as we see it. Or you could write your own book. So Abu Dawood said, yeah, I wrote my own book. It's called Sunan Abi Dawood. It's a different organization. But essentially it's the same content, right? But you're going to have different people, not just Imam Malik. It could be other people as well, right? So what that means then is the content of the Muwatta is found in the six books. Does that make sense? Because the people, author of the six books are going to be traveling to get the content of Muwatta and other people, of course, right? There are other key people like Ad-Darimi, he said this. Ad-Darimi said, like somebody who doesn't have the hadith of Malik, right? As Abu Dawud does have, right? Someone who does not have the hadith of Malik, or the two Sufyans, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Sufyan al-Thawri, or the two Hammads, Hammad ibn Salama, Hammad ibn Zayd. And then I think Shu'bah he mentioned, like he doesn't have anything. So what you'll find is there's like these certain key people who are really, really important, and other very important people as well, but key people like Malik, and people will travel the world to collect those, right? And so in reality, when we read the Muwatta, it's either the Muwatta as organized by Imam Malik with a chain going back to him, or the certain hadith from the Muwatta as organized by somebody totally different. Does that make sense? So that's why Al-Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi, the great Maliki Andalusian scholar, he said the core of the Sunan is the Muwatta. And then the next core is the Bukhari, and then the next core is Tirmidhi. Because Tirmidhi is going to have all these hadith. Like Tirmidhi will say, حدثنا who is it? معن ابن عيسى القزاز قال حدثنا مالك. So for example, there's another Muwatta, which is the Muwatta of Ma'an ibn Isa al-Qazzaz, right? So Tirmidhi studied that. He narrated the Muwatta via so and so. Does that make sense? So I want you to understand the idea of like a book, right? When we think of a book, we don't think of a book with a chain transmission. We just think of a book, right? Like here's Tom Sawyer, right? But that's not how it works. Like somebody like who's the author of Tom Sawyer? What's his name? Um, uh, American novelist. Can't remember his name now. Anyway, this person writes a book, right? And then he passes it to it's in manuscript. So who changed it? Who put it into print? And who printed it? Right? And who copied it from that? Right? In each of these stages. And when we're going back 1,000 years, it's pretty important to know the stages that they've gone through. And then when you see this, and then you see the Bible, you're like, oh man, that's a big difference, right? Or you see this, and you see the Bhagavad Gita of the Hindus, like, oh man, like you have no idea where these things even come from. There's no clue. Whereas we have or Beowulf, right? You've heard of Beowulf, right? Here's this story, poem in Anglo-Saxon, right? Who wrote it? Don't know. Where was it written? Don't know. How did it reach you? Don't know. Just found it in a church, randomly 300 years ago, and it seems to go back to this date. There's a big difference between a manuscript that seems to go back to a certain date versus haddathani. These are people who are known. Qa'nabi is known, right? Abu Dawood is known. And from that person so and so, from that person so and so. These are all known people. And this is all the roots of how the information went. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. Let's go another 5 minutes, inshallah. 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. 5 minutes, 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 5 minutes So it says, باب من حلف بغير الله, someone who swears an oath by other than Allah. Right? So أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا نافع عن عبد الله بن عمر أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال سمع عمر الخطاب وهو يقول لا وأبي, no by my father. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله ينهاكم أن تحلفوا بآبائكم فمن كان حالفا فليحلف بالله ثم ثم ليبرر, I believe with a كسرة, أو ليصمت. Right? So he should do good, يبرر. Or يبرر, meaning he should fulfill his oath. Allahu a'lam. Um, okay. Malik informed us from Nafi', informed us from Abdullah ibn Umar that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard Umar ibn Khattab while he was saying, "No, by my father." Right? Who's heard of this before? Right? Google it right now. Ask ChatGPT. Is it disbelief to swear by other than Allah? Right? Please, somebody who has ChatGPT. Is it, or Google, is it kufr? Is it shirk to swear by other than Allah? What do you all find?
Answer says yes.
The shirk. There we go. Okay. Anybody else? Was that ChatGPT or was that Google?
Google AI.
Google AI. Google
Uh,
AI gave you fatwa that is shirk. So what Sayyidina Umar right did now was shirk, right? He left Islam at that time. Okay. Anybody else? ChatGPT?
I asked ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
it's scholars differ on whether it's kufr. The majority of scholars say it is not kufr, but it's a sin and a form of minor shirk
Minor
because
shirk.
it resembles the rights of
So
others.
notice how even ChatGPT is using this word minor shirk. But did you know minor shirk is not a term?
Yes, yes.
It's not actually a term, right? It's a term that's been created in the modern Salafi world, right? It's not a thing, right? Shirk al-asghar, that's not a term, right? So here from Imam Ahmad, there's three narrations on this issue, right? One, it's that it is mubah to say, I swear by my dad, or swear by the son, or whatever. I swear by, you know, the I swear by Manchester United, right? Something like that. One that's mubah, one that is makruh, and one that is haram, but none that is shirk, right? So we have to, it's important to be familiar with our eyes with these things, right? So here the Prophet says don't do that, right? So it's going to be makruh or haram, right? He's not saying astaghfirullah, you left Islam, right? He's just saying don't do that. Like Allah forbids people to do that. And tahlifu bi abaikum. So we say, the Shafis will say, if you do that, that means it doesn't count either. So I swear by my dad's grave, I will do this and this and this. That's not an oath. Doesn't mean anything, right? It's not an oath. You have to swear by Allah. I swear by Allah, I will do this. That's called an oath. But you can't swear by something other than Allah. It's haram or makruh, and it doesn't count, right? قال قال محمد وبهذا نأخذ ولا ينبغي لأحد أن يحلف بأبيه فمن كان حالفا فليحلف بالله ثم ليبرر. يبرر means برر يبر means to fulfill your vow, right? The opposite of حنث, right? So if the hadith should be before إن الله قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله ينهاكم أن تحلفوا بآبائكم فمن كان حالفا فليحلف بالله ثم ليبرر with a dhamma أو ليصمت, or should be quiet, shouldn't even say it to begin with, right? So no one ought to say that. That doesn't sound like shirk to me, does it? Right? This is Imam Muhammad. No one ought. You don't say no one ought to worship as false god, right? You don't use those words. لا ينبغي. That's not a phrase that you use, right? So it's going to be either haram or makruh. Whoever would swear an oath, then let him swear an oath by Allah, and then let him be true to his oath, or be silent and not give an oath to begin with. Um, let's just finish inshallah. So it says باب الرجل يقول ماله في رتاج الكعبة. So it's a man saying that his wealth is devoted to the door of the Kaaba. I give it all to the Kaaba. أخبرنا مالك أخبرني أيوب بن موسى من ولد. You can say ولد or ولد, the children of سعيد بن العاص عن منصور بن عبد الرحمن الحجبي عن أبيه عن عائشة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنها قالت في من قال مالي في رتاج الكعبة يكفر ذلك بما يكفر اليمين. Um, so this is a fatwa of Aisha, right? As we mentioned before, Aisha is very important in the Maliki school, and her fatwa often kind of create the Maliki school. Malik informed us from Ayyub ibn Musa, who informed me from his father, from the children of Sa'id ibn al-As, from Mansur ibn Abdurrahman al-Hajabi, from his father, that Aisha, the wife of the Prophet said, her fatwa is somebody who says, my property is devoted to the door of the Kaaba, that, quote, it is expiated by that which would expiate an oath. قال محمد فلما بلغ هذا عن عائشة رضي الله عنهم. Right, this is what we reached, right? Notice how, so now he's going to say, وأحب إلينا أن يفيء بما جعل على نفسه فيتصدق بذلك ويمسك ما يقوته فإذا أفاد مالا تصدق بمثل ما كان أمسك وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا. So notice they're not really following Aisha's opinion. Why? Because Aisha is not that significant in the Kufan, for the Kufan fuqaha. Imam Muhammad said, this has reached us. Yeah, okay, we've heard that, right? What is preferable to us is that he should fulfill his imposed. So basically, he shouldn't give all his money away. Aisha saying, don't give your money away, but you just expiate by freeing a slave. If you can't free a slave, then you feed the poor. If you can't feed the poor, then you fast, right? Imam Muhammad says, no, you shouldn't do that. You should keep your vow. If you say my wealth is for the Kaaba, what does that mean? It means you should do that. Give all your money away, with the exception of what? Retaining that which he will sustain. So he has $100,000. Okay, what do you need to look after yourself with? Okay, I need this much. Okay, give the rest away. Then when he obtains more money, he should do the same thing, the like of that which he retained. This is the verdict of Imam Abu Hanifa and our fuqaha in general, right? Because that's what you said. You said all your money is going to go to the Kaaba, so you have to do that. Okay, اللغو في اليمين. What is لغو? Inadvertent statements and oaths. So أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا هشام بن عروة عن أبيه. So Urwa ibn Zubayr, the nephew of Aisha, and Aisha radiallahu anha. So Hisham ibn Urwa, this is another one of these really important people for the Fuqaha Sabah, or Urwa ibn Zubayr himself rather. A really important key muftis of Medina for Imam Malik. رضي الله عنها قالت لغو اليمين قول إنسان لا والله بلا والله. Right? So this is the fatwa of Aisha, that لا يؤاخذكم الله بلغو أيمانكم. Allah does not take you to task for your lagwi oaths, meaning when you say I swear but you don't mean it. It's just a turn of phrase, right? Like in India, Sister Bushra in Pashto, right? People say Wallah all the time, right? Muhammad Hashim in Kenya, people say Wallah all the time, right? Just a turn of phrase, right? Aywah, people say that in Arabic. Aywah, which means wallahi, but they're not swearing an oath. They're just saying yeah, yeah. Aywah. That means like yeah, right? They don't mean I swear by Allah, right? So basically it means that according to Aisha, if you don't intend an oath, it doesn't count as an oath. If it's just a turn of phrase, it doesn't mean anything, right? So an inverted oath is when somebody says no by Allah, of course by Allah, just as a turn of phrase. قال محمد وبهذا نأخذ اللغو ما حلف عليه رجل وهو يرى أنه حق فاستبان له بعد بعد أنه على غير ذلك فهذا من اللغو عندنا. Right? So Imam Muhammad says something that's kind of interesting. He said, we adhere to this. But he doesn't really. He says, an advert, and we hold in Kufa something else. We say an inadvertent statement is that which a man swears, believing it to be right, but then later it turns clear that it's not. This is an inadvertent oath in our. That's how we understand the verse. Totally different to action, right? So one is totally different. Is a totally different thing, right? So inshallah, we'll stop there with our oaths. Inshallah, and next week we will start with. Inshallah, we'll start with sales, trading, and deferred sales. Inshallah ta'ala. We'll continue from here. Inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.